This episode is proudly brought to you by the Afrocentric Group, Southern Africa's most diversified healthcare group, building a winning health offering. Hello and welcome to another edition of AI Impact Talk with myself, Tembekile Mkhototo. Today we're taking a different route, if you will, focusing on an industry that many of us would not typically associate with artificial intelligence. I'm talking about AI and aesthetics. And here to explain where the two worlds meet is none other than Victor Snyders, the CEO of Renewal. Victor, welcome to AI Impact Talk. As I was saying in the introduction, when a lot of us think of AI, we don't think aesthetics, right? Where do the two roads meet?
It's a very, very interesting question. We've been working with various AI systems for nearly 2 years now. I think we first downloaded ChatGPT 3 days after it was released. But important to understand within any industry, what we are looking at when we look at AI is simply a photo of a moment in time. The train is moving extremely fast, and whatever you look at and is relevant today will probably be irrelevant in a week's time or in a month's time, because the evolution of AI is growing so fast. So it's very, very important to get to understand the AI systems, their limitations, their possibilities, and stay abreast of those, because otherwise you may very well find the train leaving the station without you.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. But what I find interesting about AI and the aesthetics industry is that it's not only from the day-to-day operations of the business where it's being used, but even in the treatment of the people who come through your doors, it's now been introduced.
It certainly is being done, although that is still at a relatively young stage. So in terms of the diagnostic ability, there are systems which are available now, where if you take a photograph of someone's skin and of a particular thing that's happening on their skin, you upload it, it compares that photograph to 5 million other photographs which have been pre-diagnosed, and it gives you an outcome. However, it is not infallible yet. And as a result, it requires that human intervention to see, is what this is saying absolutely correct? We cannot totally depend on the machine to give us the correct answer yet. And it is requiring that degree of human interface to help, certainly in the diagnostic side. On the treatment side, we have seen some very interesting things. So for instance, a number of hair transplants are now being done totally by robotics. And the doctor just simply programs the machine, and then you sit down for 6-7 hours and the machine goes to work and starts implanting hair on your head. I'm
both intrigued and afraid.
Absolutely. However, what is still missing is that individual touch.
Right.
And you start getting very formulaic results that are very, very similar, because it treats the human anatomy as almost a one-size-fits-all.
Which doesn't necessarily work with aesthetics, because people have very specific needs, right? And demands, in fact.
Absolutely. And constraints within what can be done, because you're working with the canvas that they present with. And the one person is thin, another person is overweight, another person has good quality skin, another has bad quality skin. So simply looking at what is done through injectable treatments, you can only do so much on certain people. And some people want to look like Russian movie stars with big lips. Other people don't. They want a far more natural look. For AI to understand that request is a lot more difficult. What we've really found is that AI has had the biggest impact where it doesn't directly affect the experience of the consumer. So AI is something that is being used extensively behind the scenes. You're quite right in terms of the running of the business end of things, but the research side, the data sorting, being able to look things up very, very fast, get very quick responses. But people want more than just the ultimate results. They're also looking for the relationships.
And how do you do that then in a world where everyone wants to get things done faster, at a more affordable level, but also you are in a space where the personal touch, the tweaks to personal preference remain central to the final outcome and what people desire.
You're absolutely right. So one of the things that we've always identified in our business is that the patient experience is as important as the result. And that personal experience, I use the analogy of a hairdresser. People go to a hairdresser and a particular hairdresser because they trust that hairdresser. That hairdresser knows their hair. They know the style that they want, but they go for more than that. They go to catch up. What's happening with your kids? Where are you going on holiday? Where are you traveling to?
You make friends in a sense.
You make friends and you build a relationship with a hairdresser. And when that hairdresser moves 20 kilometers away, you travel 20 kilometers to go and see your hairdresser because of the relationship. So it's very, very important that one does not lose that. If you take out that human element of the relationship, then it's just like going to a vending machine, or it's like going to the counter. I use the analogy of McDonald's and a Michelin star restaurant. Mm-hmm. On the one side, we have to be a McDonald's. The treatment that you give must be identical wherever you give the treatment. The burger has to be the same no matter which McDonald's you go to. No one has ever said, no, I'm going to the McDonald's there because their burgers are better than the McDonald's somewhere else.
It's all the same, right? There's standard recipe.
But there's a big problem. At McDonald's, nobody knows who I am.
You're just another number on a slip.
However, if you go into a really great restaurant, they say to you, fish, meat, or vegetarian tonight. And they cook what they have, and they know you. They know the wine you drink. They know your taste. They know the portion sizes.
How many times you come in, maybe?
How many times when you go into top 5-star restaurants and you look at their prep, before the patient, or not a patient, in this case, the consumer or the diner comes in, they will rehearse everything. When last was this diner here? When was their last occasion? Is this maybe their birthday? What wine did they drink last time? What were their preferences? And all the staff are geared up to meeting the needs of that diner. So on the one side, we have to be absolutely personalized, but yet we have to be consistent. And it's finding the balance between those two things, which very often is a nuance. What AI will eventually get to is understanding that nuance, but it isn't there yet. And people do crave the relationship.
Does that nuance then imply, or in fact outright mean, that yours is one of the few industries perhaps where AI will never fully replace the people? Because that is the recurring fear, right? Whenever we talk about AI, everyone goes, well, what does it mean for my job?
Well, ultimately, one has to look at where you want to position yourself. So not all food is sold through McDonald's and fast food outlets. There's still room for the totally personalized experience. And the 5-star restaurants are also doing very well. Go to Cape Town and you'll see they booked out 6 months ahead of time. I haven't yet seen a McDonald's which is booked out 6 months ahead of time because they produce at a different rate. Obviously, there will always be a space, but knowing where you fit into a space, I think the opportunity exists in our industry to go either the fully automated AI route, where there will be very little interaction. We're talking with a number of companies who are saying that the future of the aesthetic industry is just simply going online, making an automatic booking online, arriving to an office which is empty, going into a room, getting a treatment from a machine and leaving, and your credit card is just automatically debited on the way out.
Which will require an incredible amount of trust on both ends.
Absolutely. But is that exactly what people want? Yes, there will be people who want that. But there will be people who want the personal interaction and knowing where you fit into that industry and how you use it. For us, AI's biggest use has been in behind the scenes work. We've built our own AI systems that help us manage aspects of the business. For instance, a doctor or a therapist is able to simply ask our SkinBot Plus, which is what we called it, all the contraindications that exist for a particular treatment. What can be done before, what can be done after, what health conditions are contraindications that the treatment cannot be done. An answer that will be given instantly.
And that then allows you, right, am I right, to give the best service to the customer.
Absolutely. It would have taken the equivalent person looking through documents and online resources, possibly 5 to 10 minutes to establish all of those things. They will now get it in 5 to 10 seconds. So they have more time to spend on the person and the discussion than on actually doing research. So we've used it there, and we've built that system where we've put terabytes of 20 years worth of data and information on every single thing that we do into the system to now be able to interpret it. We then spent 6 months asking this system questions to see whether we could get a wrong answer. Mm. And every time we got a wrong answer, we had to reprogram the system to tell it what was the right answer.
And that's what's also fascinating, right, Victor? When you in these AI conversations, that ultimately the results are only as good as the information that the humans give to the system.
Absolutely. And building those systems is vitally important. Other ways that we've used it, certainly in terms of processing data and invoices. Our invoices haven't been processed by a human being for the last 18 months. They are simply fed into a machine. Everything is scanned. It automatically goes into the accounting system, into the correct ledger account. The accounts are reconciled, and it is done. And it takes 1/10 of the time that it used to take a human being to do all that same work. Reconciling financials, where you have 10,000 transactions a month that are coming in via credit card, via cash, via EFT, via membership payments and all sorts of things, accounting those back to your bank account, back to your credit card system, and making sure that everything is where it is supposed to be, used to take one person 3 to 4 weeks of full-time work. That entire job is now done through AI and takes about 8 minutes.
So improved business hygiene that also allows you, am I right then, Victor, to say, with that time that you now have taken back, you're able to focus on other ways to deliver better.
Correct. So with the money and the time that has been saved, instead of bringing it straight across to your profit and loss account, has been reinvested into the business in terms of the relationships with the patient, with the customer, with the experience that they have, which is the human part. For instance, one of the things that we have resisted very, very strongly is using AI robots to answer questions from patients on AI systems. It's fine if you want to book a movie and you're doing that through AI, but a human being will have far greater nuance of understanding that patient. So there we operate one-on-one with the person so that they have your attention. I don't want to land up. There was a lovely episode of Big Bang Theory where Raj fell in love with Siri because he gave Siri compliments. So Siri started giving him compliments. And the next thing, he thought that Siri was a real person. And he went to the offices of Apple to try and meet Siri because he wanted to take it further.
So we don't want to fall in love with the skin renewal bot.
Never, never. You've got to talk to people. And I think as the world goes, and this is my own interpretation of it, as more and more things become automated and we start losing the ability to communicate, I think so the human species will more and more crave human interaction. We're seeing in countries like Japan, for instance, where 35, 40-year-olds are not married. They're living alone. They live in their apartments. They get everything delivered to them. They don't have relationships. They live in an online make-believe world. And depression, suicide rates, at the end of the day, as a species, we need to cohabit. We need to work with each other. We need to build relationships. It is only through that the human species has evolved faster than other species because of their ability to work together as teams, as companies, as religions, as countries.
An ecosystem in a sense.
And there needs to be that. And I think the less human interaction we have, the more we actually need it for our own personal development and mental health.
And how much of that then, Victor, is uniquely South African? You use the Asian example. South Africans we pride ourselves in being a country that takes community seriously. When you walk into a space, you greet, you introduce yourself, get a name, maybe make a friend with every encounter almost.
Absolutely. And in South Africa, it is more complex than just about anywhere else in the world. We travel extensively. We go to the conferences in Europe, in America, in the Far East. Number one, the extent to which South Africa is a multicultural society is to a greater degree than in most other countries around the world, because we have the nuances of not only race, but religion, but also cultural upbringing. And we have inflections for an AI system to understand perfectly spoken English. But English is spoken by someone in KZN or is spoken by someone from Mpumalanga might be significantly different, that it doesn't quite understand that. And the nuances of those cultures. We have a South African thing where we always greet people, and we greet the fact that they are a fellow human being. South Africa is the only country in the world where I can get into an elevator and say good morning to everyone.
They respond.
If I tried that in New York, I might get stabbed. Okay, when you're on the tube in London or on the underground in New York, you don't look at anyone. You stick to yourself. In South Africa, we greet everyone. There is this inherent friendliness that we have. And that is a nuance that is very, very peculiarly South African in terms of that degree of friendliness. But you also have to understand every culture. If I'm meeting with someone from a culture who doesn't want to talk straight to the business point, but wants to greet first, get to know each other. In the years that I used to work in Mpumalanga, when you were doing a land deal and you went to meet the chief there, at the first meeting, you did not talk about the land. You talked about the cattle and the crops and the weather.
This when you were an engineer in your past life.
An architect. And then you finally got to a point where you could eat together, and then you could eat with each other and you could drink with each other and whatever. And maybe at the second or the third meeting, could you start discussing business? Now, if I tried that in the boardroom of Anglo-American, they would say, can we get to the point? So those nuances in South Africa are very, very different. And I think that's what South Africa is, I think, in some ways more difficult to apply some of these AI systems because of the cultural nuances. But it's evolving fast.
So interesting that at the end you highlighted perhaps a challenge in the application of these AI products, but I wonder how much opportunity also lies in that same nuance for you.
You know, the reality is it has become virtually impossible to predict where AI will take us because it is moving so fast. If we had predicted the current trends 5 years ago, it was virtually impossible to predict that unless you were maybe some of the people who were working in those development labs. So to predict where it's going, I think, is an exercise in futility because it might go somewhere else entirely. The only important thing is to stay incredibly abreast of it, be aware, and then go with it and use it in ways that will assist your business. It will always be a tool. It'll be something that can make your business more efficient, more cost-effective, quicker to deliver, give you a better understanding, manage your data, all of those things. It will be able to assist you. In our particular field, I don't believe it will take away from the human interaction ever. I would not want to go to a robot to have my hair cut.
And just on that, for Skin Renewal, is the focus then as a business more on adapting or innovating as well in an ever-evolving world?
I think both of those. Number one, you have to adapt to the technology as it becomes available, but you also have to be prepared to invest in innovating that technology to work for you rather than just accepting the technology the way it's given. So, for instance, one of our systemized, our software as a service systems that manage our business has an AI system, but we have built our own AI system because it understands us. The system that came direct with the software is implemented across 20,000 clinics around the world. And we're not like the other 20,000. We have our own particular nuances. So we took a lot of those principles and innovated it and adapted it that way. So I think innovation and adaptability go hand in hand with each other.
It's fascinating because just in reading up on AI in the aesthetics industry, I was quite intrigued, in fact, to see that we're at a point where the technology is so great that you may even have a scenario where people are able to, quote unquote, try on what they want to get done, right? And the machine is basically able to say to you, well, this is how it would look. So good idea, maybe not so good idea for you.
Except the machine should actually say, this is how you could look. It may turn out this way, but it may not turn out exactly this way. And once you start predicting what someone will actually look like before you've done the work, it's what artist is going to show you what the picture is like until he has completed the picture. Mm. And sometimes that requires adjustments and a change in strategy and emphasis as you go, because that's what makes it art. If the machine does it, yes, it can just tell you what it's going to look like when it's finished. Mm. Once again, people need to be treated as individuals, not simply as number 17 in a queue of 80.
But it's interesting that you keep saying that, Victor, when everyone who tries to bring in AI into how they do business, and this has been a criticism, that they're opting for that fast food option where churning out as much as possible, making sure that then fattens the bottom line. And well, if you like it in 5 years as the person on the receiving end, great. If you don't, sorry, you can come back and get something else.
So by way of an example, our initial consultation with the doctor used to be a half-hour consultation. And in that time, the doctor would invariably have to look certain things up. Either they would know it from there, but very often they'd have to go into their MIMS, which is the medical information system, to check whether there's a contraindication, whether one thing can be used with another, and those things. That is now all gone, but our consultation time for initial consult has gone up to 45 minutes because we're actually investing more time in getting to know the person.
Personalization.
Absolutely.
And in personalizing the service, where would you like to see the industry go with AI still?
You know, I think where I would like to see it go is virtually immaterial, because this has taken on a life of its own. It's going to go where it wants to go and where the developers take it. It's really how we adapt to it. We would always try to create that human interface, but we are using and will continue to use AI very extensively in how we run the business and where it doesn't impact on the direct interface with the patient. Because we believe people want to talk to people, not to robots.
And what ethical questions has AI raised in aesthetics? Because that's another burning issue at the moment about great that there's innovation, but people's data is compromised, identity, etc.
I'm not as worried about data integrity and confidentiality because those things can be handled. What I'm more concerned about is where the responsibility lies. As doctors have an ethical responsibility to do what is right for the patient. And ultimately, the transaction is between a patient and a doctor. If that transaction is between the patient and a machine and something goes wrong, who does the patient sue? The machine or the person who owns the machine? And that responsibility, if you take it seriously, of do no harm, which is the credo of the doctor's profession, then there always needs to be human oversight, because the responsibility ultimately is with the doctor.
So basically saying doctors should not outsource their responsibility.
I think they can use the AI systems as tools in making the consultation more efficient, but the responsibility can never become that of the AI. It's a question we raise with self-driving cars. If you have a self-driving car and you are now involved in an accident, does my insurance company sue Tesla because the AI system didn't work, which was steering the car? Or is it my responsibility? Who carries the excess? The AI company or the driver of the car who was told, you don't need to be driving it. The car will drive itself. So I think there the question of responsibility is something that we need to give a lot of thought to.
And will that be left to individual businesses to answer, or do we need perhaps industry bodies to start formulating answers to that very position?
I think that certainly there is a very strong case to be made for regulations, but what to regulate in a machine that is working so fast. If we look at our South African context, developing regulations can take 2, 3, 4 years of processes, consultation, parliament, etc. By the time those regulations are implemented, the industry has already moved on and the regulations are already out of date. So it becomes very, very difficult to regulate for something which is moving as fast as we are. If we just look at the evolution of AI just over 2 years, from the first download of ChatGPT to how we are using it now, it would have been impossible 2 years ago to regulate for the things that are happening now.
So quick response times, but in your experience then, what would you say you've learned about how easy it is to move with the times and bring in the next best thing?
I think one has to move on with the times. I don't think you have any options to simply say, this is the way I've done it for the last 100 years.
Is it easy to do? Because people are frightened, right? Traditional business is naturally quite afraid sometimes of trying new things.
I gave an analogy to someone earlier today. 100 years ago, if you were going to travel from Europe to South Africa, you got on a boat, and it traveled for a month and finally offloaded you down at the southern tip of Africa. If you took one of those people and said, hang on, we got a better way. We're going to put you in a metal machine and it's going to fly you there in 11 hours. Tell me you wouldn't have been afraid.
Definitely would have been. Still am actually to fly.
But it's exactly that. What we fear is change. You cannot fear change. You have to absolutely accept that change is a way of life and go with it. To me, you'd still be traveling in boats and we wouldn't be traveling in planes. And I'm overseas 3-4 times a year. That would mean 3-4 months of the year that I could not effectively get anything done because I'd be in the ocean.
And on adaptation, compare perhaps South Africa to the rest of the world. We referenced European markets, for example, what's happening in Asia, etc., that we perhaps should be jumping onto?
You know, I think one of the massive advantages that we have in South Africa is that we are not overcrowded. It's one of the greatest luxuries we have in South Africa is that we're surrounded by space. When you live in Tokyo or London or New York, you almost get onto the treadmill every morning in terms of your commute, the walk to the pavement, the queuing for every single thing that you want to do. You become a part of a system, almost robotic. And for those people to have that robot type existence managed for them is sometimes easier. For us, we have so much choice and we have space around us and we have the luxury of that space. So I think that it is slightly different, and I think we are less likely to become robotic and more geared towards that personal choice and that personal space and not having our lives dictated to us by systems. But a lot of this will depend on politics, on regulations, on the banks and all of these things. Where it's going to go to, the Lord alone knows. But we may as well get on the bandwagon and make the most of it.
Buckle up and hope for the best.
Certainly buckle up, yes.
So lastly then, Victor, we're asking everyone this season this question. What does AI mean to you then, given what can be a rigid context, but also especially the fluidity of this evolving world?
Opportunity, more than anything else. It's the opportunity to create effective changes in a business, but it requires thought. It requires careful implementation, but it is a massive opportunity for evolving every industry.
Victor, it's been really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on AI Impact Talk.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us.
And that was Victor Snyders, CEO of Skin Renewal. I hope you found this conversation insightful. We're back with another edition for you very soon. Thank you so much for watching AI Impact Talk. Take care. This episode was brought to you by the Afrocentric Group, Southern Africa's most diversified healthcare group, building a winning health offering.